My husband left me on a Tuesday. I had a temperature of 103, lungs so tight I couldn't breathe, and I was alone on a 400-acre ranch 12 miles from the nearest hospital. The truck had a dead battery, and my phone was at 11%. He left because his mother told him to. While I was on the kitchen floor pressing my cheek against the cold tile to survive the fever, the attorney his mother hired was on the other side of a phone call learning something she never expected. The will his mother had paid to rewrite, the one she thought would push me out of the family forever, had been filed 14 months earlier. It had one name on it, mine, not because he forgot to change it, but because he never intended to. The next 72 hours became the most expensive mistake Elener Holt had ever made. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Ruth Callahan Holt. I am 41 years old. I was born in March of 1984 in Harlan County, Kentucky, the third daughter of a coal miner who died when I was 9, and a woman named Bet who raised 3 girls on a school nurse's salary, and a stubbornness I have spent my entire adult life trying to replicate. I married Daniel Holt in 2014. He is 44, the only son of Elener and the late Raymond Holt, third-generation cattle ranchers, 400 acres in Harlan County that Raymond built from 180 through 40 years of Kentucky summers and one bad winter in 1991 that almost took everything. Raymond Holt was a good man. He died in 2019. He left the ranch to Daniel outright, no conditions, no trust structure, no Elener as co-trustee. Just Daniel, clean title, because Raymond had apparently understood something about his wife that he had the wisdom to plan around. Elener did not forgive Raymond for that will. She transferred that energy to me instead. I had been on that ranch since 2014. 10 years of feeding cattle before dawn, managing the seasonal crew, keeping the books, running the vendor relationships, filing the quarterly tax estimates because Daniel's attention to paperwork has always been the weakest load-bearing wall in an otherwise solid man. If this story moves you, subscribe. Hit the like button. It costs you nothing and means everything to this channel. Now let me tell you about Elener, and about the Tuesday she made the phone call that cost her everything she had spent 11 years trying to take. Elener Voss Holt is 67 years old. She had the kind of authority that made rooms go quiet when she entered them. She has white hair she wears swept back and the particular authority of a woman who learned, early, that the most powerful position in any family is the one that controls the information flow. She controlled Daniel's information flow from birth. 2013, before the wedding. I am introduced to Elener at Sunday dinner at the main house. She does not say anything unkind that first evening. She simply asks 3 questions with the precision of a woman who has been doing this for decades. Where did I go to school? What does my father do? Do I have siblings? I answer honestly, community college. My father is deceased, 2 sisters. She nods. She does not ask a follow-up. The assessment is complete and I have failed it and we both know it and neither of us says so. 2014, the wedding. Elener wears a lavender dress that photographs beautifully and speaks at the reception for 4 minutes about Daniel's childhood in a way that mentions me twice, neither time by first name. She says Daniel's wife both times. I note it. I file it. I smile. 2015 through 2018, the management campaign. Elener begins calling Daniel every morning at 7:00 a.m., not some mornings, every morning. The calls last between 12 and 40 minutes. The ranch Daniel owns, outright in his name alone, she conditions it from the East Parlor by telephone, every morning, and Daniel listens with the patience of a man who has been trained since childhood to believe that listening is the same as agreement. 2019, Raymond dies. At the reception, Elener corners me in the kitchen and says, very quietly, Raymond left this ranch to Daniel. I want you to know that I know what that means, and I intend to be very clear about it going forward. I said, Elener, I know what it means too. She looked at me for 3 seconds. She said, I don't think you do yet. She was right, I didn't. Not yet. 2020 through 2022, the escalation. Elener begins calling vendors I manage, countermanding decisions I've made with the seasonal crew, showing up Tuesday mornings without notice to review the books. She frames every incursion as staying connected to Raymond's legacy, and Daniel absorbs it as truth. I push back once, in March of 2022. I tell Daniel that Elener called the hay supplier and renegotiated a contract I had spent 6 weeks building. Daniel says, "Ruth, she's grieving. Give her something to do." I say, "Daniel, she's not grieving. She's running the ranch through you." He says, "That's not fair." I say, "Daniel, count the Tuesday mornings." He does not count them. 2023, the attorney. In September of 2023, I receive information that Elener has retained an estate attorney in Lexington. A man named Gerald Finch, 17 years in estate planning, specialty in agricultural property, known for his willingness to restructure existing family estate documents around a changed family situation. Changed family situation. That was the moment I realized Elener wasn't trying to control my marriage anymore. She was trying to outlive me on paper. I sat with that for 3 days. Then I called my own attorney. Her name is Patricia Morrow. 30 years in family law, 20 of them in contested estate and marital property disputes in Kentucky's agricultural counties. She listened. She took 3 pages of notes. She said, "Ruth, do you know the current state of Daniel's estate documents?" I went home. I pulled the filing cabinet in the ranch office. I found Daniel's 2014 will beneficiary, Ruth Callahan Holt. I found the $1.4 million life insurance policy Raymond had taken out on Daniel in 2007, beneficiary, Ruth Callahan Holt. I found the ranch deed, Daniel Holt, sole owner. I photographed everything. I sent it all to Patricia. She called back in 30 minutes. She said, "Elener can rewrite Daniel's will all she wants. But the insurance policy beneficiary requires Daniel to change it himself, and the deed requires your signature, because Kentucky is a dower right state. As his wife, you have a protected interest in that real property regardless. Elener Holt can spend every dollar she has on Gerald Finch, and she cannot move you off that ranch without your signature and a divorce." I said, "Patricia, does Elener know this?" She paused. She said, "Not yet, but she's going to find out." I want to stay in February 11th, 2025. I had been sick since Saturday. A tightness across the chest on Friday evening I filed under cold coming on. By Sunday it was different, fever arriving Sunday afternoon, climbing, with a cough that sat in my sternum like something structural. Monday night my temperature was 102.7. Tuesday morning it was 103.4. Daniel woke at 6:50 a.m. He checked on me. He said, "Ruth, you are going to the doctor today. I'll drive you." He went downstairs. At 7:03 a.m., Elener called. I know the exact time because I heard Daniel's phone ring on the kitchen counter below me, and I lay there and listened to the one-sided conversation drift up through the farmhouse floors, clearly, completely, without insulation between what was said and what was heard. Elener said she needed him. The water system at the main house, something that required him specifically, immediately, that only Daniel could evaluate because he had installed it in 2018. I heard Daniel say, "Mama, Ruth is sick. She's running a fever." Silence where Elener's voice was. I heard Daniel say, I know. But she..." More silence. "She can call the neighbor if she needs something. I'll be back by noon." He came upstairs at 7:14 a.m. He stood in the doorway in his coat and his boots and looked at me with a temperature of 103.4 and said, "Ruth, Mama needs me. I'll be back by noon. You call Donna next door if you need anything." I said, "Daniel, the truck battery is dead. I told you Thursday." He said, "I'll call Donna before I leave and ask her to check on you." He left at 7:19 a.m. He did not call Donna. I lay in that bed until 9:30 a.m. when the fever crossed 104 and the tightness in my chest became the specific tightness of a body asking you, with increasing urgency, to make a decision. I got out of bed. I got down the stairs holding the banister with both hands. I got to the kitchen floor and sat down because the room was moving in the way rooms move when your temperature is high enough to affect your equilibrium. I pressed my cheek against the tile. I had 11% charge on my phone. I called Patricia Morrow. Not because Patricia does medical emergencies, because Patricia had told me in October, "Ruth, the moment something happens that puts you in a hospital, you call me before you call anyone else. Before Daniel, before Elener, me first." I said, "Patricia, I need an ambulance." "Daniel left this morning on Elener's call. The truck battery is dead. I'm on the kitchen floor." She said, "I'm calling 911 from my office right now. Stay on the line." The ambulance arrived at 10:07 a.m. The paramedics found me on the kitchen floor with a temperature of 104.1, bilateral lung consolidation visible on the portable X-ray, and an oxygen saturation reading that made the lead paramedic look at his partner and say 3 words I was too ill to fully process, but understood in structure. "She's going in." If you're new here, subscribe. Hit the like button. Every story here is about one thing: the document that was already in place before anyone realized there was going to be a war. Now let me tell you what pneumonia and a beneficiary designation have in common. Harlan County, ARH Hospital. Admitted at 10:47 a.m. on Tuesday, February 11, 2025. Diagnosis: bilateral pneumonia, right lobe primary. Oxygen saturation 88% on admission. IV antibiotics, supplemental oxygen, 4-day inpatient stay minimum. The admissions nurse asked me the standard questions. When she reached the beneficiary designation, she looked at her screen and said, "We have you listed from a prior visit in 2021. You're still the primary on Daniel Holt's file as well, is that correct?" I said, "Yes." She typed, she moved on. Those 45 seconds were the most expensive 45 seconds Elener Holt had ever not been present for. Now let me tell you what was happening on the other side of that Tuesday morning, in Lexington, in Gerald Finch's office, while I was being admitted to a room on the 3rd floor. Patricia had called me 3 weeks earlier with an update. Gerald Finch had completed the revised estate documents in December. A new will for Daniel, naming Elener as primary beneficiary of the ranch, with me receiving a reasonable allowance. Gerald had scheduled a signing meeting with Daniel for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Elener had chosen Valentine's Day for the signing. The Tuesday call, the water system emergency, was the setup. Get Daniel to Lexington on Tuesday, keep him there through the week, have him sign on Friday. Done. That was the plan. The problem was Elener thought I was alone. She didn't know Patricia had already started building the case. Here is what the plan did not account for. While Daniel was driving to Lexington, Patricia Morrow was already documenting the circumstances of my admission. Specifically, that I had been left alone in a rural property 12 miles from medical care with a dead vehicle battery and a temperature over 103 at the request of my mother-in-law. Patricia was building a file in real time, and while Gerald Finch was reviewing the revised will documents in his office at 11:00 a.m., preparing for a Friday signing, Patricia called him. She said, "Gerald, this is Patricia Morrow. I represent Ruth Holt. I want you to be aware that Mrs. Holt was admitted to Harlan County ARH this morning with bilateral pneumonia. She was left alone at the ranch property with a dead vehicle battery following a phone call your client made to her husband at 7:03 a.m. this morning. I have documented the timeline, the admission records, and the call log. Your client's Friday meeting is now the subject of active legal scrutiny. I would encourage you to counsel your client accordingly." Gerald Finch was quiet for 6 seconds. He said, "Patricia, I'll need to consult with my client." She said, "Of course, I'll be here." She called me at 11:43 a.m. She said, "Ruth, how are you feeling?" I said, "Patricia, tell me." She said, "Gerald knows. Elener is going to know within the hour. The Friday signing is in jeopardy, not because we stopped it legally yet, but because I have just introduced the possibility that a judge reviewing a contested will could have access to the timeline of this morning. Elener left you on the floor of a ranch house to get her son into a signing room. That is a fact now. It is in the hospital record. It is in my file." I said, "Patricia, what do I do?" She said, "Nothing, you recover. I'll handle the rest." I lay back against the hospital pillow. I thought about Elener Holt in her East parlor with her telephone and her checkbook and 22 years of running her son's life from a distance of 3 hours. I thought about my own name on a beneficiary line she had not managed to reach. I closed my eyes. The IV dripped. The oxygen hissed. I slept. Before I tell you what Daniel did when he found out I was in the hospital, drop your country in the comments right now. One word. Hit that like button while you type. Now let me tell you about the phone call Daniel made at 12:47 p.m. Daniel found out I was in the hospital at 12:47 p.m., not because he called to check on me, because Patricia called him. She said, "Daniel, this is Patricia Morrow. I am Ruth's attorney. Your wife was admitted to Harlan County, ARH this morning at 10:47 a.m. with bilateral pneumonia. She was transported by ambulance because the truck battery was dead and she had no other access to transportation. She is stable. She is in room 312. Silence on Daniel's end. He said, Mama said she would be fine. Patricia said, "Daniel, your wife has bilateral pneumonia. She was on the kitchen floor when the paramedics arrived. Come to the hospital." He came. He arrived at 3:15 p.m. and walked into room 312 and looked at me, the IV, the oxygen tube, the monitors, with the specific expression of a man who has just seen, for the first time in 3 dimensions and in a hospital room, the full cost of a decision he did not fully make. He sat down in the chair next to the bed. He said, "Ruth." I said, "Daniel, I know." He took my hand with both of his. He is a large man with hands that have done 40 years of ranch work, and they were shaking. He said, "Who is Patricia Morrow?" I said, "She's my attorney." He said, "Since when do you have an attorney?" I said, "Since October." He was quiet. I said, "Daniel, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not say anything until I'm finished." I told him everything. The September intelligence about Gerald Finch, the October meeting with Patricia, the Hay contract, the beneficiary designation I had found in the ranch office filing cabinet, the Friday signing scheduled for Valentine's Day, the phone call Patricia had made to Gerald Finch that morning while I was being admitted to room 312. I told him all of it, not as accusations, not as an ultimatum, but as a sequence of facts delivered in the calm, precise voice of a woman who has been building a file and wants her husband to understand the architecture of what he has been living inside without knowing. When I finished, Daniel did not speak for 90 seconds. He said, "She was going to have me sign on Valentine's Day." I said, "Yes." He said, "And the water system?" I said, "Patricia will tell you what she thinks that was. I want you to make your own decision about what it was." He called Patricia at 4:30 p.m. from the hospital hallway. The call lasted 22 minutes. He came back and told me Gerald Finch had confirmed the Friday meeting was Elener's initiative, Elener's timeline, Elener's instruction. Daniel had not been shown a draft of the document he was scheduled to sign. And when Daniel asked Gerald Finch directly whether his fiduciary obligation ran to Daniel or to Elener, Gerald had paused for 4 seconds before answering. That pause was all Daniel needed. He called Elener at 5:07 p.m. He stood in the hallway outside my door. He said, "Mama, Ruth is in the hospital." He said, "Bilateral pneumonia. She was on the kitchen floor. The truck battery was dead." He said, "I am not asking you to explain. I am telling you that Friday is canceled. Gerald Finch will be receiving a letter from Patricia Morrow tomorrow morning." He said, "Mama, don't." He said, "I love you, but Ruth is my wife. Her name has been on my insurance policy since 2014, and I want you to think very carefully about what you were planning to do with that and what it would look like to a judge." He said, "There is no Friday." He said, "Good night, Mama." He came back into room 312 and sat down and put his face in his hands. Then he looked up. He said, "What does Patricia need from me?" I said, "She needs you to call Gerald Finch in the morning and formally terminate his representation. And she needs you to sign an amendment to your existing will restoring the original beneficiary structure and adding a dower rights acknowledgement that makes any future amendment require my written consent under Kentucky law." He said, "Ruth." I was never going to sign that Friday document. I said, Daniel, I know. Sign the amendment anyway. I need the document, not your word, the document. He looked at me for a long time. He said, okay. He signed it on Thursday, the day before the meeting Elener had scheduled for Valentine's Day, in Patricia's Lexington office, witnessed, notarized, filed with the county clerk by end of business. Gerald Finch received Patricia's letter Thursday morning. He withdrew from Elener's representation by Thursday afternoon. Elener did not accept what had happened quietly. Elener Holt has not accepted anything quietly in 67 years. She absorbs, regroups, and redirects, which is a different motion from quiet and a more dangerous one. She called Daniel every day for 3 weeks. He answered 4 of those calls. The content followed a progression Patricia had predicted exactly. Week 1, it was a misunderstanding. The water system really did need him. I had no idea Ruth was that sick. Week 2, Ruth has always had it out for me. Patricia Morrow is poisoning your marriage. Week 3, I am your mother. Everything I have done has been to protect what your father built. Ruth is not a Holt. She will never be a Holt. Daniel said the same 3 sentences every time. Mama, Ruth is my wife, the ranch is mine. Then he would say goodbye and hang up. After the 4th call, he stopped answering. Elener pivoted to the network. Harlan County is a small county, and she had spent 30 years building a social architecture in it. Her version spread the way weather spreads. Ruth had manipulated Daniel with a lawyer. Ruth had intercepted legitimate estate planning. Ruth had manufactured drama. Patricia had anticipated this too. In March, Patricia filed a civil complaint in Harlan County Circuit Court. 3 claims: tortious interference with the marital relationship, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil conspiracy with Gerald Finch to deprive a surviving spouse of her legally protected marital property interest. Gerald Finch received a copy of that filing. He called Patricia's office within the hour. Patricia said, Gerald, you drafted a will designed to reduce a surviving spouse's protected interest under Kentucky dower law. I have the draft. I have the engagement letter. I have 14 months of billing records. Would you like to discuss your concerns further, or shall we let the filing speak for itself? Gerald Finch retained personal counsel by end of business. He filed to be dismissed from the civil action in exchange for a sworn statement detailing Elener's specific instructions over 14 months. Patricia accepted. The sworn statement ran to 11 pages. On page 4, Mrs. Elener Voss Holt specifically instructed me to structure the revised testamentary documents in a manner designed to minimize Ruth Callahan Holt's ability to contest the estate distribution, and to time the signing for a period when Ruth Holt would be least likely to seek legal consultation. Least likely to seek legal consultation. She had hired an attorney to time the paperwork for a moment when she calculated I would not have one. I had hired one in October. I had beaten her to the document by 4 months. The civil action settled in June of 2025. Elener's attorney made the first call to Patricia on April 3rd. Opening position: an apology, a mutual release, no monetary damages. Patricia placed on the table Gerald Finch's 11-page sworn statement, the hospital records, the paramedic's sworn testimony, and a damages calculation totaling $340,000. Elener's attorney came back at $80,000. Patricia said, we also need the following non-monetary terms. Elener Holt's written acknowledgement that Ruth Holt holds a protected marital interest in the ranch property. A notarized agreement that Elener will not initiate or participate in any future estate planning on Daniel Holt's behalf without Ruth Holt's written consent, and a formal letter of apology signed by Elener and delivered to Ruth in person. The in-person apology was the sticking point. Elener was willing to sign a letter. She was not willing to deliver it in person. Patricia said, in person or we proceed to trial. Elener delivered the letter in person on May 7, 2025. She came to our ranch. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where I had pressed my cheek against the tile in February, and she placed the letter on the table between us. She looked at me for a long moment. She said, you were always smarter than I gave you credit for. I said, Elener, I know. She picked up her coat. She left. The settlement was $220,000, monetary and non-monetary terms combined, the most comprehensive family interference settlement Patricia had negotiated in 20 years of practice. Daniel read every page. When it was done, he looked across the table at Patricia and said, "Is there anything else she needs from me?" Patricia said, "No, you've done everything right." He said, "I should have done it 11 years ago." Patricia said, "You did it now." That's what's in the document. It is September of 2025, 7 months since February 11th. 4 months since Elener sat at my kitchen table with a letter she had been required to deliver in person. The ranch in September is the ranch it has always been, 400 acres, the particular amber of Kentucky in early fall, the cattle moving to the east pasture with the unhurried authority of animals who have learned the land. I do the books at the kitchen table in the mornings. I manage the vendor relationships. I file the quarterly estimates. I rebuilt the hay supplier contract, better terms this time, because I negotiated it without anyone calling ahead to countermand it. Daniel's 7:00 a.m. calls now come from me, not from his mother, not because I demanded it. Because he made the decision, quietly, in the weeks after February, to restructure his mornings around a different voice. Elener still lives in the main house 3 miles down the road. I do not know what she tells people about the settlement. The county will make its own assessment, as counties do, over time. What I know is this: she had 11 years and an estate attorney and a February morning and a dead truck battery and a telephone. I had 4 months and Patricia Morrow and a filing cabinet in the ranch office and a beneficiary line that had not been changed since 2014. The document always outlasts the person who forgot to read it. Raymond Holt left this ranch to his son without conditions because he understood what it meant to plan around a problem before the problem arrives. I think about Raymond sometimes. I think he would have approved of the way I protected what he built. I think he would have said, with the particular economy of a man who spent 40 years building something worth protecting, "Ruth, you did it right." The ranch is 400 acres. My name is on the beneficiary line. The filing cabinet is locked. Elener Holt can call at 7:00 a.m. all she wants. Daniel doesn't answer those anymore. Quiet women eventually speak, and when they do, the room goes still. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.